Most people think they're prepared. They've got a fridge full of food, a few cans in the back of the cupboard, and they figure that's enough. But here's something that quietly unsettles food scientists and emergency preparedness researchers alike. The average household runs out of usable food within 72 hours if supply chains stop moving. Not weeks, not days, hours. And the scariest part? Most of what's sitting in your kitchen right now would be completely unsafe to eat within a week without refrigeration. But there exists a small, powerful category of foods that operate by completely different rules. Foods that don't rot. Foods that bacteria can't colonize. Foods that archaeologists have literally pulled out of ancient ruins and confirmed were still safe. Today, we're talking about 15 of them. And by the end of this video, you'll understand not just what they are, but the actual science behind why time can't touch them. Before we get into it, drop a comment below telling us what country you're from and how old you are. We're building a global community here, and every single comment helps push us toward our first 1,000 subscribers. If you want to be part of something real, hit subscribe right now. It costs you nothing and means everything to this channel. Let's get into it. Let's start with something you probably have in your kitchen right now, but almost certainly aren't storing correctly. White rice has been a survival crop for thousands of years across multiple civilizations, and the reason isn't just cultural, it's chemical. When rice is milled and stripped of its outer bran layer, the oils that cause spoilage are removed along with it. What remains is essentially a dry, starchy grain with almost no moisture and no fat to oxidize. Studies on long-term grain storage have shown that white rice kept in sealed, oxygen-free environments can remain nutritionally intact and safe to eat for well over 2 decades. The enemy of rice isn't time, it's oxygen and moisture. If you're storing rice in its original plastic bag inside a warm kitchen cabinet, you are slowly losing your investment. The correct approach is to transfer it into a food-grade container, add an oxygen absorber, seal it properly, and store it somewhere consistently cool and dark. Do that, and what you're holding in your hands is essentially a multi-decade food supply in a single bag. Now let's talk about a food that powered human civilization before refrigeration even existed. Salt is one of the most misunderstood items on any survival list because people assume it's just a seasoning. It isn't. Salt is a preservation technology. It works by pulling moisture out of its environment through a process called osmosis, creating conditions where bacteria and mold physically cannot grow. That's why cultures across the ancient world used it to preserve meat, fish, and vegetables for months at a time. Salt itself contains no organic matter, no water, no fat. There is simply nothing for microbes to consume or decompose. It does not expire. Ever. The only way salt becomes inconvenient, not unsafe, is if humidity causes it to clump, but clumped salt is still perfectly good salt. Store it in an airtight container away from steam, and it will sit on your shelf indefinitely. Beyond flavor, salt is your most powerful food preservation tool. Your pickling base, and in extreme situations, an essential electrolyte for basic bodily function. Speaking of things that practically last forever through chemistry, let's talk about raw honey. In the 1920s, archaeologists excavating ancient burial sites found sealed clay pots containing honey that was estimated to be over 3,000 years old. When tested, it was still chemically stable. This isn't folklore. This is documented food science. Honey achieves what most foods can't because of a combination of factors working simultaneously. Its sugar concentration is so high that it binds up almost all available water molecules, leaving nothing for microbes to use. Its natural pH is low enough to be hostile to bacterial growth. And raw honey contains an enzyme that produces a mild but continuous antibacterial compound. Together, these create an almost impenetrable defense against spoilage. The one rule with honey is simple: never let water get into the jar. A wet spoon is enough to introduce moisture and eventually trigger fermentation. Store it sealed, keep it at room temperature or cooler, and it will outlast you. Closely related in chemistry, but completely different in flavor, is pure maple syrup. A lot of people confuse the artificial pancake syrups with the real thing, but genuine maple syrup is a completely different product. It's made by boiling sap down to a highly concentrated sugar solution, which naturally suppresses microbial activity. When sealed and unopened, pure maple syrup can remain stable for years without refrigeration. Once opened, it needs to go into a refrigerator because the protective seal has been broken and mold can eventually form on the surface. But here's what's interesting. Even if mold does develop on opened maple syrup, food researchers note that because the syrup itself doesn't support deep bacterial penetration, you can carefully remove the surface layer, reheat the syrup to a gentle simmer, and it's safe again. In a long-term kitchen, this is the kind of resilient sweetener that earns its place. Now let's move into something that many people overlook because they think of it as basic pantry filler. Dried lentils are, by almost every nutritional measure, one of the most powerful foods you can store. A single cup of cooked lentils delivers around 18 grams of protein along with significant iron, folate, and dietary fiber, all from a tiny handful of dry legumes that weigh almost nothing. Lentils store well because they've been dried to extremely low moisture levels, and they contain very little fat, which means there's nothing to oxidize and go rancid. Unlike many other legumes, lentils also require no soaking before cooking, which matters enormously in a situation where fuel or clean water is limited. Transfer them out of their paper or thin plastic packaging, seal them in an airtight container with an oxygen absorber, and store them somewhere cool. Done correctly, lentils remain fully nutritious and safe to cook for many years. They are, arguably, the most nutritionally efficient food you can stockpile per gram of weight. Let's shift from nutrition to flavor preservation, because one thing people underestimate in difficult situations is how much the taste of food affects mental resilience. Whole peppercorns are one of the best examples of a food that stores almost indefinitely, but only when left in their natural form. The hard outer shell of a peppercorn acts as a sealed capsule for the volatile oils inside that give pepper its heat and aroma. Once you grind it, those oils begin escaping immediately. Pre-ground pepper sitting in a shaker can lose most of its potency within just a few weeks. But whole peppercorns stored in a sealed glass jar, kept away from heat and light, will maintain their intensity for years and years. This is why historically, peppercorns were literally used as currency in certain parts of the ancient world. They were valuable, portable, and they lasted. Buy whole, store whole, grind only at the moment of use. Here's one that surprises almost everyone. Pure vanilla extract, the real version made with alcohol, not artificial vanilla flavoring, is one of the few foods that genuinely improves with age. The reason comes down to the high alcohol content, which typically sits at 35% or above. At that concentration, alcohol acts as a complete antimicrobial agent. Nothing can grow in it. Nothing can decompose it. And as the years pass, the flavor compounds from the vanilla beans continue to interact with the alcohol, creating a richer, more complex aroma over time. Winemakers understand this principle well. Some alcohol-based products quite literally get better as they age. Keep your vanilla extract in a dark glass bottle, sealed, stored away from heat, and it becomes one of the rare pantry items where patience is genuinely rewarded rather than just tolerated. Let's talk about something that many cultures have used for centuries but that modern kitchens have mostly replaced with alternatives that don't last nearly as long. Ghee is clarified butter. Butter that's been cooked gently until all the water content and milk solids separate out and are removed, leaving behind essentially pure golden fat. Regular butter spoils relatively quickly because of its water content and milk proteins, both of which bacteria love. Remove those, and you remove the spoilage pathways. Ghee stored in a sealed jar at cool room temperature can remain stable for a year or more without refrigeration, and significantly longer in a cool pantry. It has a higher smoke point than regular butter, meaning it handles high heat cooking better. It's also naturally lower in lactose, which many sensitive stomachs tolerate better. In traditional households across parts of Asia, ghee was stored in earthen pots and considered a long-term kitchen staple, not just a cooking fat, but a preserved food in its own right. Now here's something that modern food science has only recently started to give proper credit. Apple cider vinegar with an active culture floating inside it is one of the most stable liquids you can keep in your kitchen. That cloudy web-like mass, sometimes called the mother, is a colony of beneficial bacteria and cellulose that signals the vinegar is still biologically active. The high acetic acid content of vinegar creates an environment so hostile to harmful microbes that it essentially preserves itself. This is the same principle that makes vinegar an effective pickling liquid. Acid kills or inhibits almost everything dangerous. Stored in a sealed bottle away from direct sunlight, apple cider vinegar remains effective and safe essentially indefinitely. Some households have maintained the same vinegar culture for a decade by simply adding fresh apple cider as they use it. Beyond cooking, it functions as a cleaning agent, a food preservative, and a digestive aid, making it one of the highest utility items on any long-term storage list. Let's take a moment to talk about something that has almost no calories but is completely irreplaceable in terms of its function. Cornstarch is a pure carbohydrate extracted from grain, dried to an extremely low moisture level, and it contains nothing that bacteria can metabolize. No protein, no fat, no water. It is essentially inert from a microbial perspective. As long as moisture stays out, it lasts indefinitely without any change in its chemical or physical properties. It thickens sauces, stabilizes soups, acts as a binding agent in baking, and in a kitchen operating with limited ingredients, it stretches meals in ways that few other powders can. Transfer it from its original box into an airtight container the moment you get it home. Keep it far from any source of steam or humidity, and then genuinely forget about it. It will be exactly the same whether you open it in 6 months or 6 years. Here's one that belongs on this list for reasons that go beyond nutrition. Distilled white vinegar, plain and clear, is perhaps the most underestimated bottle in any kitchen. Its acidity level, typically around 5% acetic acid, makes it chemically inhospitable to almost all microorganisms. The FDA has confirmed that properly produced and sealed distilled vinegar has an indefinite shelf life. It doesn't just survive, it actively preserves other foods. You can use it to pickle vegetables, clean contaminated surfaces, preserve color in fruits, and balance the pH in fermented preparations. Unlike more complex flavored vinegars, distilled white vinegar is stripped of all the organic components that might eventually degrade. It is pure, stable acid in a bottle, and in terms of long-term kitchen utility, almost nothing else in your pantry does as many different jobs. Now let's get into something that people associate purely with dessert, but that has serious survival credentials. Hard candy. Not the soft, moisture-rich kind, but true hard candy made from a cooked sugar syrup cooled into glass-like crystals. Contains almost no free water whatsoever. The water activity in hard candy is so low that microbial growth is physically impossible. Bacteria and mold require a minimum level of available water to function, and hard candy simply doesn't provide it. Research into confectionery shelf life has shown that properly stored hard candy remains chemically stable and safe for consumption for many years without any degradation in safety. The only issue over time is texture and flavor. It may become sticky in high humidity or lose some intensity, but it never becomes dangerous. It's compact, calorie-dense, and provides an immediate glucose boost when physical or mental energy runs low. In terms of weight-to-calorie ratio and shelf life, few foods are as efficient. Let's talk about baking soda, which most people treat as a box that gets shoved to the back of a cabinet and forgotten. That forgetting, it turns out, is completely justified. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate, a mineral compound, not an organic food. It contains no living organisms, no water, no fat, no protein. There is absolutely nothing in it that can rot, oxidize, or be consumed by bacteria. Stored in a sealed container away from moisture, it lasts indefinitely without any change in its chemical effectiveness. It's a leavening agent, a gentle abrasive cleaner, a deodorizer, and in certain situations, a helpful antacid. Few things in your kitchen pull that range of functions. The only thing that changes over time in improperly stored baking soda is that it can slowly absorb odors or moisture and lose some leavening potency, which is why sealed storage matters. But sealed and dry, it is essentially permanent. Here's a food that almost no one thinks of as a survival item, but that has remarkable staying power when prepared correctly. Green tea leaves that have been properly dried and stored in sealed airtight containers can retain their active compounds and remain safe to consume for several years. Tea doesn't spoil in the way that organic food spoils. It fades. The flavor and aroma gradually diminish as the delicate volatile compounds slowly dissipate. But the leaves themselves don't become unsafe. Studies on polyphenol stability in dried tea leaves show that when protected from oxygen, light, and humidity, the antioxidant content degrades far more slowly than most people expect. Vacuum-sealed tins stored in a cool, dark location are ideal. In a situation where psychological comfort matters as much as physical nutrition, the ritual of brewing and drinking tea provides a sense of normalcy that's genuinely valuable. And finally, we arrive at a category of food that doesn't just resist spoilage, it physically prevents it. High-proof distilled spirits, those with an alcohol content of 40% or above, create an environment where microbial survival is essentially impossible. Vodka, whiskey, aged rum, unopened bottles of these have been found in storage decades later and confirmed to be completely safe. The alcohol itself is the preservation mechanism, which is why humans discovered distillation not just for consumption, but for preservation. Alcohol was historically used to preserve botanical medicines, to store extracts, and to maintain the safety of drinking water by mixing it with potentially contaminated sources. The flavor of a spirit may slowly evolve over many years of bottle storage, especially if the seal is imperfect and slow oxidation occurs, but its safety does not diminish. Store bottles upright, sealed tightly, away from heat and light, and you have a genuinely indefinite shelf item. Here's what ties all 15 of these foods together. None of them expire because each one has removed or neutralized the conditions that spoilage requires. Microbes need moisture, organic material, and in some cases, oxygen. These foods deny them at least one of those requirements entirely. Salt pulls water out. Honey binds it up. Alcohol poisons the environment. Dried grains remove the moisture before storage even begins. Vinegar acidifies everything around it. This isn't luck or tradition. It's chemistry. And understanding that chemistry is what separates a kitchen that feeds you through hard times from one that fails you in the first week. If you made it all the way here, you're the kind of person who takes this seriously. And that matters. Drop a comment below with where you're watching from and your age. We're tracking our global community and every comment genuinely helps. If you found value in this, share it with one person who you think should know this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one counts. There's more coming that you won't want to miss.